Hi everyone, I'm Ruth Wasserman Lande. Today is December 11th, 2024. This is the live daily briefing of the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's Office. We are live on Instagram, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and available afterwards wherever you get your podcasts. Please start submitting questions in the chat, and as always, like and subscribe to help us reach a wider audience. Israel took out Assad's weapons so that they don't fall into the wrong hands. The former Syrian regime had jets, ships, missiles, and chemical weapons, all of which Israel destroyed. By doing that, the IDF did not only serve to protect Israeli citizens, but also the entire world, as we all know that the forces that toppled the Assad regime include Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and a myriad of other Islamic factions. Some of them want to keep fighting against Israel and the West in general. In fact, some have even already declared that they want to overtake Mecca and Medina in Saudi Arabia. Western militaries have been striking Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria for years. Just this week, the US military struck jihadi forces in Syria, particularly in the center of the country, in the vicinity of ISIS enclaves. The Syrian rebel leader al-Julani is a US and UK specially designated global terrorist. As a matter of fact, the US has been offering $10 million for al-Julani's capture for 11 whole years. Now that he has taken over Syria, he gave an exclusive interview to CNN and made a significant effort to appear moderate, claiming that he seeks no combat with neighboring countries nor with Israel. That, however, remains to be seen. The fall of the Assad regime exposed many of his horrific and inhumane abuses against the Syrian people. The capture of Assad's Sednaya prison revealed some prisoners who were held in captivity for 4 decades. Syrians were tortured, political dissidents and their wives, daughters, children. Corpses were piled high, and some prisoners who were found had literally forgotten how to speak from the trauma. Approximately 30,000 Syrians were murdered at Sednaya prison. More than 600,000 people died in Syria's civil war since 2011. Incredibly, since 2011, the UN General Assembly passed only a handful of resolutions against Assad Syria and over 160 resolutions against Israel. Naturally, human rights laureate Assad Syria was elected to the UN Human Rights Council. The same Assad who used chemical weapons against his own people. Now, would you be surprised to learn that Assad Syria chaired the UN Conference on Disarmament, no less? 8 days ago, on December 3rd, the General Assembly of the very same United Nations demanded that Israel hand territory over to Assad's regime. Now, how insane is that? When you next hear the UN bashing Israel, its favorite pastime, remember, it turned a blind eye to the cries of Syrian women and children for years. It still turns a blind eye to the suffering of Iranian women in the Islamic Republic of Iran. It ignored horrific crimes perpetrated against Yazidis, Christians, and other minorities in Iraq, Iran, Syria, and many other countries. It still insists on not seeing nor hearing the atrocities committed against the Sudanese people and unrest and human rights abuses in many more countries in the African continent. Now let's take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
Our first question is from Instagram. The supreme leader of Iran blamed the US and Israel for the fall of the Assad regime. Is there any truth to what he's saying, and how do you think he really feels?
First of all, there's no truth to anything that he says ever. And this is an important thing to say because the manipulation of a part of the truth is something that he uses all the time. The only small part of the truth in this scenario is that Israel weakened his own access, the access of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and its arm, the Hezbollah, which helped the Assad regime. And then what happened was that the rebels saw the weakness of their arch enemy, the Iranian axis, the Hezbollah, that helped to murder many, many, many Syrians, and then attacked. But of course, Israel had nothing to do with the overtake.
This question is from Akiva on YouTube, who asks about the situation in Australia with the anti-Semitic attack on the synagogue in Melbourne. What do you think causes anti-Semitism so far away from Israel's borders?
This is a very important question. Anti-Semitism is not a new phenomenon. In fact, it's a very, very old one, and it changes forms and shapes. But at the end of the day, it's the same hatred against the Jews. And I want to say something very important. Hatred against the Jews or anti-Semitism never ends with the Jews. It starts and then it decays the society. It begins because of incitement, because of a lot of indoctrination on the social media, in communication apparatuses, and so on, and the lack of a very strong hand against hate, against biases, against discrimination. Yes, with the Jews, but not only. Once society begins this decay, it then turns onto other minorities and against society in general. Watch out. The authorities need to put a strong hand and their foot down against that. It doesn't matter if it's in Australia, Europe, the United States of America, or in Arab countries.
Our next question is from our Instagram stories. It's about Syria. Will the Druze who are living in the Israeli Golan Heights finally be able to reunite with their families, the Druze inside Syria? What is the situation for the Druze in this region?
So the Druze, of course, is a minority which had been persecuted by the Muslims for centuries because, according to the Muslims, they are non-believers, they are kuffar. But in fact, what the Muslims say is that they are a kind of a sect in Islam. Of course, the Druze say that they are a separate religion, and they've been persecuted. Now, whether the Druze living in Israel, holding Israeli citizenship, and serving in the Israeli army will be able to physically reunite with their family members remains to be seen, because we need to see what will happen in terms of the relations between Israel and current day Syria. But the Druze in Israel have warm relations with their brethren in Syria, and there is a kind of an understanding between them that they are part and parcel of one family. We still need to see whether the current, if one can call it, leadership will actually be true to their own words in Syria, and that is that they don't want to war against Syria's neighbors, including Israel. We have to wait and see, even though we're talking about Islamists that have proved that statement a little bit problematic in the past.
There are images circulating on social media of the tomb of Bashar al-Assad's father, Hafez al-Assad, set on fire. What do you think are the emotions of the people in Syria right now? Will there be another revolution after this one, or will Syria unite?
It's very, very difficult to unite Syria because it is very much divided and has been divided. In fact, when Syria as a nation state was formed, it was formed very, very in a superficial manner by European imperialist forces, the United Kingdom and France. And in fact, they didn't take into account that there are Kurds in there, Druze, Christians, Armenians, Sunni Muslims, Alawite Muslims, and so on and so forth. The possibility of all of them to live in one place, similarly to Lebanon is very, very difficult. And it would be seen whether the kind of leadership that is currently in Syria would be able to hold this nation state as one united people. But there's a lot of anger amidst the Syrians regarding Assad the father and Assad the son because of the inhumane atrocities that had been perpetrated against people. It is unbelievable as a person, as a mother, as a human being, to see what has been done to the Syrian people.
This is our last question today. The IDF just published a statement saying that it eliminated one of the elite Hamas fighters who invaded Israel on October 7th, the head of the paragliding unit. How do you see Hamas's strength in Israel today, more than 1 year after October 7th, and will Hamas ever lay down its arms?
So first of all, Hamas has been significantly weakened. And if we compare today's situation to 1 year ago, it's not the same Hamas. They don't have the equipment, they don't have all the tunnels that they had, and they certainly don't have the manpower and the weapons. However, the ideology behind Hamas is an indoctrinated, extreme Sunni radical ideology, which has not gone anywhere. And these fighters that are left there, first, they have nothing to lose. And second of all, they have this very radical, extreme ideology still and continue to fight in a guerrilla fashion, which means that we still need to continue to make a way with those that remain. And this is very significant because if the Fatah will come into the Gaza Strip, the Hamas will take over them and basically continue to rule from behind the scenes. And this is a danger the world needs to take into account. The Hamas are dangerous, not only for Israel, but for any country that seeks stability and for the West. Thank you so much for being with us. That's all we have time for right now. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, tomorrow, 3 p.m. Israel time, we'll see you again.